Today's story is told from the perspective of a heartbroken husband. It started with lipstick. Not on a collar, no, on a glass. A wine glass, left on the kitchen counter at 4:27 a.m. Deep red, fresh. Not mine. She always cleans before bed. Always. Darla doesn't even let a crumb sit overnight, so finding that glass perfectly placed next to the sink like it had meaning sent a ripple through my gut. I didn't ask her about it. I just stared at it like it was whispering a story I already knew. Rewind 12 hours. She said she was going to a charity rooftop event. I wasn't invited. She said it was company only. Something about executives and partners and how I'd be bored anyway. I said okay because I always say okay. But this time, I followed. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't. But after she left, something in my chest twisted. Not jealousy, not anger. Something more pathetic. Desperation. Fear. I don't know. But I got in my car and drove toward the address I remembered seeing on the envelope she accidentally left in the trash. I parked 2 blocks away and walked up the stairwell to the rooftop like a criminal. I stayed behind the exit door, cracked it open just enough to see without being seen. And there she was, lit by string lights, laughing with a drink in her hand, not looking around for me, not checking her phone. Not alone. The man next to her wasn't just anyone. He was someone, the kind of someone you recognize, even if you've never met him. Polished, perfect teeth, confident like the world had never once told him no. She leaned into him like the night belonged to them. He touched her waist like it wasn't the first time. And I stood there watching, dying a little in silence. I didn't storm in. I didn't make a scene. I just left. No goodbye, no confrontation, no drama. Just the click of a door closing behind me and the sound of my own footsteps echoing down the stairwell of a life I didn't recognize anymore. By the time she got home, long past 4 a.m., I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at that wine glass like it might explain everything. She didn't see me awake. She tiptoed inside, placed the glass on the counter and stood there for a moment, just breathing, like she was trying to remember who she was supposed to be. She didn't cry. Not then. But I think something in her cracked, because by morning, she broke completely. And that was just the beginning. The sun hadn't even risen yet when I heard her crying in the bathroom. At first it was soft, like she was trying to strangle the sound in her throat. But then something gave out. A choking sob escaped her, followed by the unmistakable sound of her hand slamming the mirror. I didn't move. I just lay there listening like a coward because part of me still hoped this was a nightmare I hadn't woken up from. But it wasn't. She came out 10 minutes later. I could hear her bare feet on the hardwood floor. She paused by the bedroom doorway. I didn't close my eyes in time and our eyes met. She froze. Her mascara was smeared like she'd been running through a thunderstorm of regret. But I said nothing. I rolled on to my side away from her and let the silence answer every question she was too afraid to ask. She didn't speak. Not then. She just backed out of the room. And a few minutes later I heard the garage door open. She left again. I remember the engine stalling once before it pulled away, like the car was hesitating the same way I had the night before. But she didn't stall. She left. The next few hours were a blur of not knowing what to do. I sat in the kitchen, that wine glass still sitting there, and I started wondering how long this had been going on. Was last night the first time? Was it just flirting or something else entirely? And why didn't she even bother to hide it? I kept thinking about how she looked at him, that ease, that warmth. And then I realized something that made me feel sick. I hadn't seen her look at me like that in years. Maybe she hadn't smiled at me like that since before her promotion. Before the endless meetings, the networking events, the late nights that didn't need explanation because I never had the courage to ask. I went outside to clear my head, just a walk around the block. Fresh air, they say. But every step I took felt like I was walking away from a version of my life that had already disappeared. When I got back, her car was parked in the driveway. She was sitting on the front steps with her phone in her hand, staring at it like it held a bomb. She didn't look up when I walked past her. I didn't stop either, just opened the door and went inside. I left it open behind me. 5 minutes later, she followed. But what happened next wasn't an apology. It wasn't denial. It was worse. She stepped into the house like she was walking on broken glass. I didn't look up from the couch. I could hear her breathing change, like she was building up to something, but the words didn't come. I stayed quiet, let her squirm, let her sweat in the silence I used to fill with comfort, with forgiveness, with softness she didn't deserve. After nearly a full minute, she finally spoke. "Curtis, can we talk?" That phrase, that dreadful phrase, the one people use when they have already made a decision and are just bracing for the fallout. I nodded, but I didn't say a word. My stomach was tight, my throat even tighter. She sat down on the far end of the couch like there was a court-ordered buffer between us. Last night was stupid. I drank too much and I was just talking to. I laughed. Not a big laugh, not even a bitter one. Just this soft, painful thing that slipped out of me like a cough. She stopped mid-sentence. "Don't," I said. "Don't insult both of us by pretending it was just talking." Her mouth closed, her eyes dropped to her lap. She started fidgeting with her fingers, a nervous tic I'd only ever seen once, the day her father passed. That's when I realized this wasn't just about what happened last night. Something was unraveling behind her eyes, and I wasn't sure I was ready to know what it was. "I didn't plan it," she whispered. I didn't go there thinking anything would happen. But when I saw him..." She stopped herself. She knew she'd already said too much. The silence that followed was thick, ugly. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. Finally, I asked, "How long?" She hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any confession. 3 months, she said, barely audible. And just like that, 1,000 pieces of my life rearranged themselves into something I no longer recognized. 3 months, 90 days of lies, 90 mornings of waking up next to her while she smiled like nothing was wrong, 90 nights of late meetings and client dinners while I stayed home organizing our tax documents and meal prepping like an idiot. "You didn't think I'd find out?" I asked. She shook her head, tears finally escaping her eyes. "I don't know. I think part of me wanted to be caught. I didn't know which part of that made me feel more worthless, the betrayal or the fact that she had grown so numb to it. She was practically begging to be exposed." She reached for me, but I stood up before her hand could touch mine. I couldn't stand her pity, not now. That's when I noticed her phone vibrating on the coffee table. The name on the screen, G. No last name, just a single letter. But her face, the way it drained the color from her cheeks, told me everything. Without a word, I picked it up and I answered. "Hello," I said, holding her phone like it was a live grenade. There was a pause on the other end. Then a man's voice came through, low, calm, confident. "Darla?" he asked. I didn't speak right away. I wanted him to feel it, that flicker of confusion before the panic set in. He repeated her name, but this time softer, almost intimate. I felt my teeth clench, and still I said nothing. Just let the silence stretch until it snapped. "Who is this?" he finally asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Her husband, dead silence. A different kind now, not awkward, guilty. The kind of silence that always comes after a lie is caught mid-sentence. I could almost hear him shifting on the other side, deciding whether to hang up or own it. Darla stood up quickly, her face turning ghost white, but I raised my hand to stop her from lunging. She froze in place, watching me like she didn't recognize me anymore. The man coughed. Then, without apology or shame, he said, "I didn't know she was married." That lie, it hit harder than the confession. It was clean, practiced, instant. And I knew, just knew, it wasn't the first time he'd said it. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Then you're either blind," I said. "She's really good at pretending." "She told me it was over between you two," he replied quickly, almost defensively, "that she was just staying for financial reasons." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that version of my wife, the one telling someone else that our life together was just a technicality, felt like a stranger. I looked at Darla then. Her arms were crossed over her chest, but she wasn't fighting it. She wasn't even denying it. I ended the call without another word. No threats, no shouting, just one tap. Call ended. And then the silence returned louder than before. I handed the phone back to her. "That's what you've been telling him?" I asked. She looked away. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." That phrase again. Didn't mean for it to go that far. As if cheating was a slip of the tongue. As if months of lies and betrayal could be filed under "accidents happen." I walked past her and grabbed my coat. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I needed air. Not to think, just to breathe. But when I opened the front door, something on the porch stopped me cold. A package. A plain cardboard box. No return label, just my name written in black marker. Not our name. Mine. I bent down and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. I closed the door, brought it inside, and placed it on the kitchen counter. "What is this?" I asked, but she looked just as confused as I was. I opened the box, and inside were photos. Hundreds of them. Darla, that man, different nights, different places, some at restaurants, others in a hotel room I didn't recognize. They weren't just candid shots, they were intimate. His hand on her thigh, her lips on his neck, her face glowing in ways I hadn't seen in years. I looked at her. She was frozen in place. No tears now, just shock. Maybe even fear. She whispered, "Who? Who sent this?" I stared down at the final photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was them last night at the rooftop party, and I was in the background watching. I couldn't stop staring at that photo, the one of me in the background watching them. It wasn't just proof that someone had been following Darla. It was proof that someone had been watching me too. The composition was deliberate, like a message hidden in plain sight. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. It felt like a setup. Darla backed away from the box like it might explode. "Curtis, I swear I don't know who took those. I didn't even know anyone saw us last night." I didn't answer. I started pulling the photos out one by one, sifting through the timeline of my humiliation. The earliest one was dated April 16th. That was 2 weeks before our anniversary. The one she forgot because of a conference in Austin. The one I spent alone at a diner eating pancakes and lying to myself about why she didn't call. "I want to know who sent this," I said, finally breaking the silence. Someone wanted me to see all of this. Someone went out of their way to collect it. She looked pale. "You think it was him?" "Gee, no." I said he wouldn't need to hide. Whoever sent this didn't want credit. They wanted impact. I flipped one of the photos over. On the back, scrolled in shaky handwriting, was a short message. "He's not the only one." My fingers tightened. The words burned in my mind. It wasn't just G. There was someone else. Darla gasped and shook her head instantly, her voice cracking as she said, No, Curtis, that's not true. It was just him. I swear to you, it was just..." But her voice faltered halfway through. That's when I saw it. Guilt. Not the kind you fake to survive an argument. Real guilt. The kind you carry deep. The kind that leaks out through the eyes even when the mouth keeps lying. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She knew I knew. And that scared her more than shouting ever could. I walked into the den and grabbed the fireproof lockbox where we kept old bills and passports. I opened it and took out the manila folder I had shoved in there months ago, the one I never intended to use. It had receipts, bank statements, account passwords, and a retainer agreement with a divorce attorney I never had the guts to call. Darla watched me in stunned silence. "Curtis, please just let me explain." "You had months to explain," I replied. "You just never thought I'd figure it out." "I messed up, okay, I did. But it wasn't because I stopped loving you. It was because I stopped knowing who I was. I felt empty, like I was disappearing. And when he came along, it was like I mattered again. I didn't do it to hurt you." That was her defense. That cheating wasn't meant to be personal. That it just happened while I was busy folding laundry and renewing car insurance. I should have walked away. But then the doorbell rang. We both froze. It was 9:14 p.m. The sky outside was a heavy gray, threatening rain. I walked slowly to the front door and opened it. There was no one there. Just a single envelope on the doormat. No stamp, no name. Inside, a single flash drive. I stared at the flash drive in my palm like it was radioactive. Darla stood behind me, barely breathing. The tension between us was suffocating, but I didn't say a word. I just closed the front door, walked to my office, and sat down at the desk. My fingers hovered over the laptop for a second before I plugged it in. She followed slowly, staying in the doorway. "Curtis, you don't have to watch it right now," she said, but it wasn't concern in her voice. It was fear. Not the kind that comes from guilt, but the kind that comes from knowing control is gone. She no longer had a say in what I'd see or what I'd believe. The story was leaving her hands. The drive contained one folder. You deserve the truth. No password, no encryption. Inside there were 3 video files labeled by date. The earliest one was from late March, a time when she told me she was working overnight on a project rollout. I opened it. The video looked like security footage. Hotel hallway, grainy, black and white. Time-stamped, 11:47 p.m. Darla entered the frame, arm in arm with a man who was clearly not G. Different build, older. She kissed him right there outside the door. No hesitation, no shame. The next file was worse. It was a hidden phone recording, handheld, shaky. They were in a car together, laughing. Her hand was on his leg. And then she said something that crushed what little I had left. If Curtis ever found out, he'd probably thank you for giving him an excuse to leave. I paused the video. My ears were ringing. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel betrayed anymore. I just felt erased. Like the man I had been, the man who paid the bills, walked the dog, made her coffee every morning, was a joke she shared behind my back. She started sobbing behind me, repeating my name like it was some kind of lifeline. Curtis, please. I was in a bad place. I didn't even know who I was back then. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know someone was recording us. I swear I didn't know. But that wasn't what made me look at her. It was the third video, the one dated only 4 days ago. This one had audio clear as day. The camera was angled through the crack of a door. Darla was standing in a room fully clothed, pacing nervously. A man sat on the bed. Not G, not the man from the hallway. A third person, she said. He's weak, you know. I don't think he'll ever leave me. He wants to, but he doesn't have it in him. I could do anything and he'd still be there waiting like a dog. The man on the bed laughed and said, "That's what makes it easier, huh?" And she nodded. She nodded. I didn't speak. I just closed the laptop. The silence in the room was a living thing now. Darla collapsed to her knees, pleading. It was a mistake. I was trying to convince myself I didn't love you because I didn't feel worthy of you anymore. I didn't mean any of it. Please, Curtis. I walked past her like she was furniture. I went upstairs, pulled the suitcase from the back of the closet, and started packing. I wasn't loud. I wasn't dramatic. I just folded the shirts I had worn through years of believing we were forever and placed them gently between layers of disappointment. Darla came into the room shaking, holding the wedding photo from the hallway. "You said we'd fight for this," she whispered. I looked at the photo in her hands, then at her face. I did, but you stopped fighting a long time ago. You just didn't think I'd ever notice. And then I zipped the suitcase. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't want the satisfaction. The suitcase wheels scraped across the driveway as I loaded it into the trunk of my old Honda. The night air was still and heavy, and for a moment I just stood there gripping the door handle, trying to convince myself that this was really happening. That I, Curtis, forgettable, predictable, passive Curtis, was finally leaving. But before I drove away, I walked back to the house with one last thing in my hands. A letter. It wasn't rage-fueled, no venom, just a page and a half, typed, folded, sealed in an envelope labeled with her name in small, neat handwriting. I left it on the kitchen table next to the box of photos. She didn't try to stop me. Not this time. She was still upstairs, probably curled up next to whatever version of herself she could still justify. Or maybe she was waiting, hoping I'd change my mind halfway down the stairs. But I didn't. I wouldn't. And what I left in that letter was the last piece of me she'd ever have. Inside, I wrote, "You wanted me to stay so you didn't have to feel the consequences of your choices. You confused my silence for weakness, my forgiveness for blindness. You fed me the version of you that was easiest to love while hiding the one who needed someone to hurt. I can't compete with your emptiness anymore. I won't. I gave you years of loyalty, kindness, and grace. You gave me doubt, confusion, and lies. You buried the man I was beneath excuses. And now that I've dug him up, I won't let him go again. I hope the people you chose were worth what you lost. This isn't revenge. It's release." I signed it. I left it and I drove. But I didn't go far. I checked into a cheap motel about 20 minutes away. The kind with yellowed lamps and buzzing AC units in a parking lot that always smells faintly like cigarettes. I didn't have a plan. I just needed space. Somewhere the air wasn't so thick with betrayal. I turned off my phone. Not airplane mode, not silent. Off. I couldn't bear the thought of watching her name light up my screen. I needed the quiet, even if it killed me. But the universe wasn't done twisting the knife. The next morning I checked my email for the first time since everything unraveled. Buried between a discount from a hardware store and some spam from a pet food site was an anonymous message. No subject, no sender. Just one sentence. You don't know the full story yet. Attached to it was a video file. Against my better judgment, I downloaded it. It opened to a hotel lobby. The angle looked like security footage again. Darla stood near the elevator, pacing, visibly upset. After a minute, G arrived. They spoke. She was crying. He tried to comfort her, but she pulled away, said something, then shoved him hard. Then she said something I couldn't hear, but it was followed by her turning to the camera and waving. Not at the lens. At someone standing behind it. She knew someone was filming her. It wasn't just a secret caught on tape. It was a performance. I sat frozen in that motel chair, the laptop screen glowing back at me as Darla turned to the camera and smiled faintly. It was subtle, not joyful, not wicked, just knowing. She wasn't caught off guard. She expected it. That's when it hit me. These recordings weren't made by accident. Someone had been documenting her decisions on purpose, and she knew it. There was no timestamp on the final video, just one more message attached in plain text. Not everything is what it seems. Meet me. It included an address. I shouldn't have gone. Every rational part of me screamed that this was a trap or a mistake, but I was already past the point of pretending logic had any say in my story. So I went one last step forward into the mess. I thought I understood. The address led to a small private investigator's office 2 towns over. When I arrived, the man behind the desk was already expecting me. His name was Graham. Late 60s, ex-military. Quiet eyes like he'd seen far too much and learned to keep it all in. "You're Curtis," he said, motioning me inside. "I knew you'd come eventually." He handed me a folder and leaned back without saying much more. Inside were transcripts, emails, messages, everything Darla had exchanged with multiple men. Not just G, not just the guy from the hotel. There were 3 others. She wasn't just lost. She was reckless. But the reason Graham had been watching her wasn't about me. "She's under investigation," he said. "Fraud. Company money. Illicit travel bills tied to fake vendors. We followed her to get evidence, but we didn't expect to uncover all that. When we realized you were her husband and not part of it, we made the decision to show you the truth before the authorities did." I stared at the folder in disbelief. "I came here to uncover an affair. I had stumbled into a felony." "She'll be served next week," he added. "You've got time to protect yourself. I'd suggest moving your name off anything tied to her financially. You've already suffered enough." I left that office lighter than I had felt in years, not because I wanted her to fall, but because I realized I was no longer carrying the weight of her deception. For so long, I thought I was the weak one, the man who stayed. But I wasn't. I was the one who survived. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. She didn't contest it. I heard through a friend she had resigned from her job. I never followed up on the case. I didn't need revenge or closure. I just needed peace. And I found it. I moved into a small home near Lake Pontchartrain, started volunteering at a local wildlife rehab center, and for the first time in over a decade, I woke up not wondering if I was enough, I was just me, and that was finally okay. One evening, while sitting on my back porch with a mug of coffee and the sound of cicadas in the background, I received a text from an unknown number. It said, "You're stronger than you think. Keep going." Maybe it was Graham, maybe someone else, doesn't matter. What matters is, I believed it.